Okay, we've been sent another case. It looks like for a lower case. Looks like we're gonna. I didn't get the details on whether we're losing the entire bridge or just sectioning the bridge off or how that works. And then an immediate placement for site number 30. I went ahead and duplicated the plan and made it under my name so that we could compare the original plan to my plan. So I'd like to go ahead and start on tooth number 30 and take a closer look at that one. Right now it's planned for a Zimmer tapered screw vent, 6 millimeter diameter implant, 11.5 millimeter length. My initial thought process on this one is I'm a little concerned that this implant may be a little too large diameter wise. I would like to drop this down to the next size down. Typically there's a 5.0, a 5.1 or 5.2, I can't remember exactly in the Zimmer one, but right now I'm only seeing a 4.7 available, so we'll base our plan on that. And the reason I want to do that is mainly because right now when we take this out, to place this implant, the inner diameter of the implant itself is approximately there and approximately there. So to place this implant, we're going to have to drill this much out. That essentially leaves very little, very pretty much cortical plate only. So I'm concerned that this implant is too wide for this. So an alternative would be to go down to a 4.7 or 5.0 implant, and now we have a little more space to deal with. An alternative option, and again, I don't want to change people from different implants, would be to look at something along the lines of an active implant where the inner diameter that would be required to drill to place this implant would be only that much. So in fact, what we would have to be able to do here is drill very little, allow the aggressive nature of the threads and the end cutting aspect of this actually wedge and condense and expand this implant into place. But again, our goal here is not to really focus on the different implant brands, but just to go over the various options in terms of how we would do this. The next thing is on this particular case is this is pretty good lengthwise. It is a hair tight right here to the nerve. Again, depending on your comfort level and skill level, it should be okay. The good news is based on where the tooth ends, we're able to have the ability, I believe here, to shorten this implant just a hair. Now, when we shorten this implant, one thing that does come into play is the ability to get primary stability. So, again, the 11.5 millimeter implant certainly does work here. The only other thing that I noticed in our plan is our occlusal plane. Right now, the way it's designed looks like it's going up a little bit. So in an ideal world, I would like this to be more flat right there. So to do that, what we would do is simply just tilt this implant a little bit forward here from the apex, and that'll bring that a little bit more flat. Now what that does do, unfortunately, is move the implant a little bit to the distal, and we have just a hair bit of room here to come mesial there. And now we can go ahead and now we have the implant a little bit more centered in the tooth. Again, we are getting pretty darn tight to the nerve there. So that is a concern. I would probably actually move this over because we're a little close to the apex right there. And I would probably accept a little bit of a compromise here and tilt it and go something like this. Again, still it is definitely a little bit better than what we had before, but certainly what we had before is acceptable, and certainly this is also acceptable. And again, the more I look at it, we see that we're a good solid 2 millimeters away from the nerve here as we position this. So this looks okay. The bigger key here will be getting this tooth out. And looking at this, it looks like we have decent interseptal bone here. If we take a closer look at this right here, we'll see that the outline of our tooth is like so. So we have all implant in fresh bone right through here, and that should give stability. It's been many years since I've worked with the tapered Zimmer screw vent implant. I was at a different stage of my implant career at the time, so I can't really speak to the aggressive nature of these threads, whether or not we'll be able to get stability here. Again, my preferred implant for this particular case would certainly be the Nobel Active. I think we could do a 3.0 diameter osteotomy and then torque this implant right into place very, very nicely. But again, I do believe the tapered screw vent would work here very nicely. Now, let's go ahead and move towards site number, we'll call this 21, and take a look at this. And of specific importance here is the approach to the foramen here. And I think from a distance perspective, we're okay. What I'm not enamored with on this particular plan is how much of the thread is in this avascular cortical bone here. What I would prefer to see is the implant tilted just a bit like that to get, a little bit more engagement into medullary bone to get some vascularity to the site. Um, this particular case is very tight. My experience has been that during the osteotomy, we'll end up with a few threads showing right in here, and that this case will involve some grafting. Again, it depends really on the ability to expand with the osteotomy here. So again, if I were doing this case with my Nobel implants, I would be able to actually sink this implant with probably a 2.0, 2.4 drill, a 2.4, 2.0 taper drill, and then be able to torque this implant into place. Um, Another consideration here would be the use of bone spreaders. Do a pilot hole, a 2 millimeter pilot hole, and then use hand torque or 50 RPM bone spreaders. Something, for example, from BTI would then expand this bone and then allow you to drive the implant instead of actually cutting away the bone. In terms of the occlusal plane and occlusal table, all that looks good here. I'm very pleased with how that looks on this particular slide. So now we'll come back to, and the bone level on this one is very good as well. So we'll come here to this particular implant, site number 19, or 18, 19 we'll call it. And the first thing I would do is probably go ahead and parallel this to number 20, just to see if that'll work. And this plan, even if I unparallel it, again, I don't like how close it is to this lingual wall here. I would consider tilting that implant, getting a little more centered in the bone, or alternatively moving the implant out like this, and then maybe doing some grafting um, on the implant placement. So I'd look at something like this. Again, another option here is to do your osteotomy, do some bone spreading, but in this particular case, do be prepared to have to add a little bit of bone to the threads on this particular, a few buccal threads on these particular implants. I don't know the gingiva situation. I don't have that data. We don't have any CAD/CAM data. So I do believe this case is possible. It is very dependent upon the comfort and skill level each particular dentist. And again, do notice that this is quite close to the nerve here. So it is something that we want to be quite careful about. But we have the distance away from the nerve. So hopefully this has been helpful, and thank you for submitting your cases.